Yeah, little Indian music for you this morning. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Drummers Education Connection. We're here every Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific time to talk to you and talk to our guests and talk amongst each other about all things related to drumming and teaching and performing and educating and inspiring. And we are fortunate enough today to have on a very good friend of the show, a good friend. We met him at PASIC this past year, Frank Ferraro. Welcome to the show.
Hey, guys.
Frank is a drummer and an educator and also a psychologist professionally, and also plays in the band the Pseudo Saints based in Lincoln, Nebraska, and has a thriving teaching practice. And we're excited to talk to him. He gave a virtual presentation at PASIC last year that was really, really great. I think you can still check that out. Is it possible to still check it out?
I think so. Yeah, on their video archives, I believe.
Yeah, so check that out. We'll see if we can find that and put the link in the chat. In the meantime, we'd like to start our show off with a little segment we call Good Things. And this is just a chance for us to check in with each other every Tuesday morning and see what's going on that's good, because we always like to focus on the positive with all the heavy stuff that's out there. So I'm going to kick it down to Rick Stojak in San Diego, California. What's up, Rick?
Hey,
how are
everyone.
you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for watching, everyone. My good thing is, during COVID in 2020, my brother-in-law, Gene Hoagland, did a studio session for the legendary composer Bear McCreary. Bear put out a heavy metal concept album called The Singularity. Bear's done soundtracks for lots of major movies and all the Marvel stuff. So he's a noted film composer, but the guy loves metal. So he had Gene in, and my sister-in-law did guitar tracks too. My sister-in-law, Laura.
Cool.
So I got to do an interview with Gene way back then, back in the Mask days. Remember all that stuff? Man. Mm-hmm. And so Bear's management didn't want the video released. They wanted to time it all out. And so we just released the video. We just put it up on our YouTube channel just this morning. So we'll throw a link to that up on the site for people to see. So
we'll do
a lot of insights into Gene's recording process and working with this composer who's not necessarily a drummer, a guy who normally program stuff, right? And so Gene had to interpret all of his programming and very unique drumming because it's so outside the box, and that's the skill of a really talented musician who could kind of adapt to play parts that the composer wants, whether the composer's a drummer or not. So it's how you get unique stuff. So check out the album Singularity. A lot of big stars on that, like Slash and Rufus Wainwright vocal.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Rick, I want to point out just a thought that just occurred to me, which is like often when we ask you about good things, you have something good to say about somebody else.
Oh, that's sweet.
That's true. Sure. Well, that's just your nature, man. You're a giving, generous person, and you're always lifting other people up. So that's awesome.
Wow. That makes my day.
Chip, how about you? What's going on good for you?
Man, I'm doing all right. I'm really glad that I had this show in Prescott on Saturday that Jeremy Steinkohler helped me prepare for. It was cool. I got to do my authentic New Orleans that I learned from Jeremy in a couple songs. Some of the songs, even though I practiced to get them note for note, the band leader just wanted to do a train beat, so I was a little bummed about that. But the guy's he's the boss, and so he calls the shots, and I do what he wants, and I make him happy. So we did that, and he called a drum solo. I'd love to share it with you guys if that's all right with you.
Oh, I would love. Can you present it on the video? I'd love to hear it.
I'm ready to do it. I'm going to hit share screen.
Go for it. Oh, this isn't a good thing. This is a great thing.
All right, here we go. The Chip Ritter drum solo from Elks Theater. Can you see that?
Yep.
Here we go.
I'm gonna be you someday. I'm gonna be somebody. I'm gonna be who you want to. And I won't want you. You know, you come around and I won't be nobody. I'm gonna be who you want to. And I won't want you. You're gonna
Solo's coming out.
I'm gonna be you someday. I'm gonna be somebody. I'm gonna be who you want to. And I won't want you.
Yeah. Here we go.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Oh, geez.
Wow. Chip.
Well, there's my solo. There you go.
Dang, dude.
Outstanding. Outstanding.
Beautiful.
Dude,
Thank
such
you.
great
Thank you
showman-
for
such
helping
great
me,
showmanship.
Jeremy.
Oh, dude, it's my
Thanks,
pleasure.
man.
That's all you. I didn't help you with any of that. That's beautiful.
Right. So what's up with you, Jeremy? What's a good thing for you?
Oh, I had a couple of good things, several good things going on. I played a gig this past weekend that was a Latin gig, the first like full on Latin gig I've ever played. So I played a bunch of, Latin jazz, but this was like a salsa gig essentially. And with three other percussionists, and it went great. It was really fun, stretched a little bit for me. So that was excellent. And then I haven't told you guys about this, but I've got my annual drum recital coming up. So all my students, I put together a showcase for them, as well as a couple other teachers who kind of work for me and take overflow for the East Bay Drum School. And that's coming up next in 2 weekends. And
Nice.
we've got like 30 drummers playing, each one with one song and a backing track, and super excited about it. So great opportunity for students to see, how to be inspired, right? It's not a competitive thing. It's really just about seeing other drummers doing it, seeing other girls and women who are doing it for younger kids. So yeah, super excited about that.
Nice.
Frank, how about you, bud?
Well, I mean, this is it for me. Like I'm on this thing today. This is awesome, man. This is like a dream come true.
Oh, come on.
So, dude, I mean, I met you guys at PASIC, but I'd been following it for a while. So, I mean, this is it for today. But I will say I'm gonna have to retire after watching Chip's drum solo.
Yeah.
I mean, I
All
can't
of
do
us.
any of that stuff. I can't do the chest and the
No.
juggling. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I had to practice more.
Most of us look like deers in the headlights compared to Chip.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Can you imagine doing a clinic? We have to do our clinic, our third annual clinic this April 26th. We're at Aquarian, and so Bart, Chip, myself, and Jeremy are all doing 45 minutes. And can you imagine having to go after Chip Ritter if you had to? I
No.
think
That's why we put him last.
yeah, we put him last all the time. Yeah. Hey, we're missing our buddy Bart Robley. He is out on the road with the Sam Morrison band right now. He is one busy guy, so
Yep.
he sends his regards to you all.
Frank, you have the unique position of being a drummer and an educator like us, but also a trained psychologist. And you work as a psychologist. I'd love to hear how your work as a psychologist has impacted your work as a drummer and as an educator.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm just to clarify, so I'm not a clinician. I'm not a clinical psychologist.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit more in the experimental side of psychology. I studied mainly like how the brain works. I studied how chemicals are involved with addiction, and I got kind of heavily involved in sort of the laboratory research of psychology. But now it's more of a teaching role that I do. So I teach at a university and I teach psychology classes. And I get to kind of do a wide variety of classes, from basic intro classes to like some of my specialty stuff about the brain. So the simple answer is that the brain controls everything. So psychology is very important for everything that I do and everything that we do. So there's actually nothing that I would say happens musically or behind the drums that doesn't involve the brain. So every second, it's something that I think about, and I don't try to be like weird and heavy-handed about it to students, because they are coming for a drum lesson, right? So it's like they're just getting done with school sometimes, right? So then they, if you come and see me, they don't want school part 2.
Right.
But at the same time, a lot of the things that are affecting them, both positively and negatively, are mental. There's a very strong mental component to playing music. So I try to deal with things like with motivation. That's
a big one.
motivation
Yeah.
is big. We can talk more about those topics, but like how I would say psychology helps me a lot is motivation of students, sort of how they regulate and deal with their emotions, self-confidence, dedication to something that they're trying to pour their time into and may not see a reward right away, right? Some of this musical stuff is delayed gratification.
Right.
The thing doesn't happen for you for a while, but you can't give up on it because it could be around the corner if you don't know. But then, a lot of social media stuff, social media comparisons, all the things that students are seeing in modern times, that is psychological, and what they're seeing and how they're seeing it, how they're interpreting what they see. I try to help them sometimes, especially with students struggling, with their progress and stuff. So each one of those could be a topic for further discussion. But
yeah, I mean, I know we want to get into other things that you do, but these things are fascinating to me, and I think would be of great value to us and also to our listeners. Let's start with motivation, the first thing you mentioned. So this is something I know we've all struggled with as teachers, and maybe even sometimes as players ourselves. How do you, as an educator and as a psychologist who's sort of aware of all these things going on, maybe that all of us aren't paying as much careful attention to as teachers, how do you deal with a student whose motivation is flagging and who just feels like they're not making any progress or getting frustrated and it's getting in the way?
Yeah. So one thing I want to be really upfront is that just because I have a background in psychology doesn't mean I have a magic wand for these students. So
what?
Yeah, it's true.
How much for your magic wand?
They are motivated.
Yeah, bam. Just do the spell and it's there. I'm just like a lot of you guys. A lot of us have these issues, and so my background helps me, but it doesn't give me a foolproof method, or it doesn't give me a magical cure. I'm also a parent. I have a son now who's getting his first real job soon, and I've raised a kid, and that helps with my perspective a little bit. But in terms of motivation, though, I would obviously say a lot of it, I try to figure out what are they afraid of. And that may seem a little strange, but like a lot of the things that people aren't motivated about, there's some root cause there of fear, in my opinion. So it's like, well, I had a student recently who wanted to get into this like steel drum group in Lincoln, which is a really cool group called Pangea, and they play steel drums, like kind of island Jamaican influence. And I've never learned how to play a steel pan. I've seen it; it's awesome. But he was going to audition for it, and got real down about it, and just didn't want to pursue it as much as I thought he was. And after talking with him for a little while, it was clear to me that the reason that he didn't want to do this, or he didn't feel like he wanted to practice it, is that he was kind of afraid and fearful that he was going to try something and fail at it. And that somebody was going to tell him he was not good, and that was going to devastate his interest in drumming. And I said, well, that's possible. I mean, you do an audition and it may not go your way, but if you don't take the risk and if you don't put yourself out there, you make no progress, and you literally won't get better. So a lot of times in music, you have to do so many things and get that one chance. You do 10 things and one thing happens, and it's a game of numbers sometimes.
Yeah, right. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I have
Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Sorry, Rick. I have a student who these guys have seen play. This kid who's 17 now, and is just an absolute monster. I mean, he can do all kinds of things I can't do, and he's auditioned for some things that he didn't get, and it was shocking. But it's like, hey, man, there's all kinds of reasons behind why you may or may not get the audition, and some of them have nothing to do with your playing.
Right.
There's the things you can control and the things you can't control. And all you can control is how prepared you are and how much effort you put into preparing, and then you let the chips fall, and then it's a numbers game, like you're saying.
Yeah, I think they're fearful of. There's something about the fear of being rejected, the fear of maybe. It's also the fear of being successful too. Actually, there's some students that realize they're good, and they're going to realize, oh, I'm really good I could do this and I could do this. And that scares them. That causes fear that they're going to actually be making progress, and people are going to be noticing that, and they're going to be recognized as a good player. And sometimes that success is a fear-based thing for students. So it's a very, I'm fascinated by it, obviously. It's a very fascinating way.
What about your basic student who just doesn't practice?
I don't have any of those. So what? They don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. So the not practicing is probably the number one issue for most of my students. So a lot of that, I think, kind of comes from what am I doing to establish a routine for them? Because what I don't want them to be doing is thinking, okay, I should practice. I want to practice. It's probably a good idea to practice. It's like, it should just be like when you get up in the morning doing something, right? It's got to be a routine. Now, for young kids, that's a big problem, but I actually give my students a practice routine depending on their level and what they're kind of time-wise able to commit to. And I tell them, post that somewhere, look at it. That's a progress mark, check stuff as you're going through it. Sometimes I have the parents actually go through the routine, and after they have to sign it, sort of like a progress especially if it's a very young student.
Right.
And I have them bring that back. I say, your mom or dad's going to verify that you're doing this. And for some of those kids, that's actually the motivator. It's like, okay, mom and dad are paying for this. So they're going to see if I'm doing it, and they're the only ones that are going to sign it. So I haven't got a student that's sly enough to fake the signature, but that could now that I've said it.
Yeah. Right.
But,
I could definitely say I've had students who have canceled their lesson because they were fearful that they wouldn't impress me. And they think that the lesson that I gave them before, they're supposed to master it, like the rudiments. Like, gosh, I didn't master the drum roll rudiments in a week, so I'm going to just cancel my lesson because I don't want to disappoint Rick. And it's all right. We're all working on developing this craft throughout our lifetime. No one is ever really going to master anything. So I would say, don't worry about impressing your drum teacher if you're a student out there. Just go in there with that passion to learn, and a good teacher will motivate you to practice even more. So don't worry.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, and that the whole thing's a process, right? I mean, everyone has all these ideas about arriving, and you never arrive. The horizon keeps receding as you get better and better, and the more you know, the more you realize how little you know, kind of thing. So you just got to commit to the process, and the rewards will take care of themselves. That's what I say.
Yeah. You could be a psychologist, Jeremy. I think.
Jeremy,
armchair. Yeah.
Jeremy could. So yeah. Frank, do you get students who come in who they know that you have this background and they just want to talk the whole time?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever had somebody. I mean, that's well advertised on my website that I have the psychology background. But I don't think actually anybody's ever specifically done that. Now, as the lessons develop, sometimes those things get more prominent, or I talk more about them, depending on if they want to get into that. But I think most of them have just looked at the drum stuff. They're just looking for, especially in Lincoln, they're looking for somebody that they can kind of get direct feedback from. We're not a big music hub. I mean, there's great drummers here, but there's not a ton of drum teachers. There, there's a lot of players, but a lot of drummers I know actually don't read music and don't teach or have no interest in teaching. So here it's a little bit of a smaller market, and then it's so I think they're mostly doing it for the lesson and trying to, especially if they've seen that I do like Jeremy mentioned, I do these showcases for students, and sometimes that gets spread around that, if you take the lesson, you get to do a showcase, you get to play in front of people, especially like tracks that they like, backing tracks. I mean, they can play to almost anything if they learn the song. So sometimes people hear about that and say, I want to get to, I want to play AC/DC, or I want to be behind the drums on this Pearl Jam song. Like, cool. We'll try to get you there.
Hey, Frank, I'm sorry.
No, please, Chip.
I was gonna ask, this is kind of like a dumb question, but don't be insulted, but what's your favorite aspect of teaching drums in a drum lesson? What lights you up?
Okay. Gosh, you guys have great questions, man. Okay. So I think what I enjoy, it's the same thing that I see like when I teach psychology. It's when a student enjoys learning that material, and they enjoy, it's like it's obvious in their reaction. They love the process of learning that information. So it's like that happens to me in both realms. When I'm in the classroom teaching psychology, something will happen. When I'm in the drum lesson, sometimes the student will go, "Oh, I never knew that was a triplet," or so, they learn something very specific that they love, and it's like it's the spark for some of those kids. And it's like it's that excitement for learning material, because that builds on itself, because then it's like, well, then here's the next thing and the next thing, and you can, like you say, you can take your whole life to try to expand that. And that, I mean, as a teacher, if you're not excited that your students are learning, and you're not excited to see that your students progressing and gaining confidence, I mean, that you've influenced their life. I mean, you are influencing a person positively for their life, maybe their lifetime. I mean, as a teacher, we have such a role in that. And man, that's, my mom always told me, just find a way to do good, get out in the world and do something good, which teaching is a great way to do that, man.
Yeah.
Nice. Well said.
Yeah. Yes.
Frank, I'm curious about your balancing act of being a university professor, and but I'm sure you must have, if you're teaching at a university level, you must have an advanced degree in psychology, right? So I imagine when you were younger, that was your career path. Like, as far as you were concerned, you were pursuing psychology, and I'd like to hear about, when did you get started playing drums, and then how did you end up making a decision to balance those two aspects of your life that you're doing? Most people we know do one or the other. You're a rare person who's able to balance both of their passions and the things that they love, and are at both at very high levels.
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting story. So let me to stop me if I go too long on this, because it's a little bit of a backtrack, I think, to where I started. So I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and I started playing when I was about 14 years old, about high school level. And me and my brother started playing music together almost at the exact same moment. He played guitar, I picked drums. Immediately we were jamming together, formed little bands. So music was very important for me, especially in those formative years, those teenage years. I started getting into all the alternative bands. And I actually went to college thinking none of this college stuff. My parents recommended I have the backup plan, but it was clear to them that I was trying to be a musician full time. And so I went off to university thinking, this will be like a year maybe. And I got more involved in music, and I started seeing some of the difficulties of being a musician, which is holding a band together, making progress. Then two guys quit, one guy moves away. The issues of addiction with some of the musicians. I had, we had made some progress, and then the addiction of some of the things that were going on in people's lives started to affect how the band functioned, and so started seeing that it's a little scary to bank on that as the career. And so and again, I was in Omaha, so I was the only band that was really kind of making a buzz was 311, which, by the way, it's 311 today, so 311 day.
Oh, wow.
Right. So 311 was the only band that we kind of knew of as had any potential to actually make a career in music. So I think what ended up happening to me is I started figuring out that the backup plan was needed. Like, otherwise my life was going to, who knows what was going to happen, right? I mean, I was I came from a very Italian, hardworking family, and I don't think there was a lot of computing in the family about, well, he can just kind of flounder and just maybe just figure out something in 20 years. Like, you got to work. Like,
Yeah.
That's the mentality from the Ferraro side. And I always tell people I come from a Ferraro, a Scapolato, and a Bruno.
That's Italian.
Ferraro.
But yeah, I mean, it's like no messing around. You can do your passions, and you should be committed to it. But there wasn't. I don't think there. I think it's a good sense. I had a good, strong work ethic. They needed. You should have some backup to what you're trying to do, especially if something's not working right away. You just can't just sit around. So, I ended up going to university, playing in university ensembles. I learned jazz and kind of bebop, big band stuff. Still played in bands, but I had a critical decision to make, which was either to keep going with the bands that I was playing with, which were fine, but they weren't really going to be making a lot of money, or go to graduate school and really learn psychology more. And so I made a critical choice to go to graduate school. I stopped playing for probably 5 or 6 years at that point. And I kind of got convinced that I was done with music. It was a phase. It was a fad. I got teaching. I got my degree.
Wow.
I started teaching full-time psychology, moved back to Lincoln, full-time psychology. And here's actually a part of the story that I want to make sure people hear. I buried music down in my soul. I buried it underneath stuff. And I thought, well, if I just keep piling the new thing, the psych, if I keep piling the career and the academics, pretty soon the music it'll just fade away, and I won't have to worry about the music anymore. But what I realized I was doing, this took me quite a while to realize, that as I was trying to bury the music, it was going around it, and it was pushing the music up. I mean, it was actually raising my interest and I was seeing that I needed music, and it wasn't burying it at all. So I made a choice to start playing music in a cover band. The university had a couple guys that played music, and we were these university teachers so I played in a cover band with an English professor and a historian and a couple other. We had this, and so the students would come see us. They'd come watch these gigs, and they were like, "That's you guys? Like, don't you guys just read books?" Or, but we would do. Man, we covered Adele. We covered, we'd cover the Beatles. We covered a lot of things, and at that point, then I started realizing music has to be in my life. I have to be playing drums. And I think I started realizing that there was an overlap between the psychology and the drumming in terms of being able to teach effectively. And I think I needed to learn how to teach. I needed to learn how to be an educator. I needed to learn how to do that. Not everybody needs that, but I needed to learn how to teach, so that if I did do drumming as a teaching side thing, I needed to know what to do for people.
Right.
And that took me a while. That took me a long time, but that's kind of where it's at now. I tell my mom and dad sometimes, I'm like, I wanted to be a musician and I wanted to teach, but I think God said, why don't you go learn how to teach first? Like, why don't you learn something about teaching?
Well,
Good.
I
Then
love
come
that.
back to
Good
that.
move.
I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
that. I love
Yeah.
the humility you have around it, and the recognition at that time that, like, okay, this is something I want to do, but I don't know how to do it yet.
Yeah.
So I want to learn how to be good at it, and as opposed to just, I mean, I get students all the time who come in and tell me about these lessons they've had with these teachers who are, they're just drummers who are trying to make some extra money on the side.
Right.
And there's no program, there's no plan, there's no understanding how these students learn, there's no adapting of what they're teaching to so the student can be successful. A lot of playing. The guys do a lot of playing in their lessons. It's like, oh, you're not helping them at all. What a waste of time and money. So,
Right.
and I, it's not like I knew. None of us knew how to do it when we started,
Sure.
right? So you do have to start somewhere, but you got to surround yourself. I mean, there's so many resources available now that there weren't when I was growing up. To become a better teacher, there's the Sabian Education Network. There's the Drummers Education Connection.
Yes.
Right. I mean, this, yeah. But yeah, I think, some humility is in order, and not necessarily feeling like you've got it all figured out in the beginning, because nobody does. I mean, I'm always learning stuff. Every week I learn something from these guys,
Yes.
and I take something away and I'm a better teacher for it,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
we're
And
always
being a
learning.
great drummer does not mean that you're a great teacher. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you could tell how, and Frank, you're such a successful teacher because you have such a passion
Mhm.
for learning how to be a good teacher. So you're constantly working on, how do I explain this? How do I help this student get the result? And
Yes.
yeah. And
Yeah.
on the other term that you were talking about, you were pushing the music down in favor of your career, or in favor of the day job, let's say. But there's a term I've heard: what resists persists. And
Cool.
yeah, and so I'm glad that you've struck the balance, and I think that is a really, really good lesson for a lot of our listeners, our student listeners.
Yeah.
That you don't have to have this career where I'm a professional drummer and that's all I do. No one really cares whether you have a day job. It doesn't minimize your contribution as a musician or your success as a musician. And so do you have any words of advice, Frank? I have a lot of students who come in and they're like, man, I missed my calling. I wanted to be a professional musician. First thing I think is, you don't really know anything about being a professional musician. It's not, you might not be cut out to be a professional musician. There's a lot involved with that can be kind of a really tricky lifestyle. So do you have any thoughts on what to say to those drummers, other than don't give up?
Sure. Well, I do tell them to educate themselves about what it means to be a professional musician, because sometimes it's a story that they've heard, right? It's a myth almost about what it is, right?
Right.
And there's
Yeah.
and of course, when we watch TV and go to shows, I mean, you go to a show and you're like, this must be the greatest life of all time. But just be careful and learn about talk to somebody that's on the road, ask them what it's like. There's a lot of great things, but there's some things that, I think I started hearing is like, if you don't like sitting around, if you don't like traveling and being in a car and being in a bus, and, you're not getting the tour bus right away anyway. So
Right.
if you don't like being in a van with four people,
Yeah.
then start breaking down some of the myths that are around music, because there's a lot. It's entertainment, right? There's a lot of show to music. Learn what it really is, so that you're educated and can make a good choice about it. Because then, obviously, yes, do it. Like, go for these things that once you kind of have an informed stance on it. But if you don't like those aspects, then it's torture. Why would you put yourself through something like that? I mean, you can learn the hard way. A lot of people do. It's not a problem. But I started thinking, man, I don't really like being on the road that much. It's not a thing for me. I much more enjoy, what I have. And I am very thankful for that. And you can be successful in many ways. That's another thing I try to tell students. You can be successful in many ways in music. Today's technology certainly opens up some things for you. It's harder in some ways, but it's also easier.
Well, that's a really good point. And I have this discussion about success a fair amount with students, and it was one that I remember talking about a lot with my mentors and peers as I was growing up in my 20s. And it turns out, you get to define what success is for yourself, and everyone's going to have a different definition of it. And, what may look like success for somebody else, you may think you want that, and then you get there and then it turns out it's not so satisfying as you'd hoped it might've been. Or, it can just look so many different ways. And it can be about your playing and who you're playing for, or the kind of music you're playing, or, being a successful teacher. You can be a successful musician playing once a week in a cover band at a local bar. You could be a successful musician being on the cover of Modern Drummer, and everything in between.
So being a pro is not like in a Van Halen video. It's not all like that 24/7.
Well, I'd say like 99% of it is like that.
But we all get inspired in different ways. I saw Aerosmith open up, or I saw the Black Crowes open up for Aerosmith like in 1991. And that was like the spark for me. I'm like, what is this? And I was just starting to play, and I thought, well, that obviously is all music is. That's what all is just you go see shows. And the educational side of it wasn't real clear to me for a while. And right. I would quote or I would reference Mike Johnston if I could here, because he was one of the first guys I ever heard say, like, the education and the teaching could be plan A. Not plan B.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And that made sense to me. I'm like, because that's more me. Like, I'm not gonna be on the road, so I'm not going to be a famous drummer. But I'm going to teach and inspire people, and that's my plan A. And he kind of phrased it that way, and that was brilliant. And so, does Mike Johnston watch this? Like, if he does,
I don't know.
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll try to get him on.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah, Mike definitely has said he's so focused when he decided to do his online lessons and be a teacher that he was 100% dedicated to it, that he's not sidetracked or he's going to miss lessons because he's going to go off and be on the road half the time, and then you're left stranded for a teacher. Is a full dedication to being an educator, and nothing wrong with that. And then the manufacturers of drum equipment have started recognizing that, as in Sabian did with the Sabian Education Network. When I got my Sabian endorsement, it was as an educator, and the same for Vic Firth. They have the Vic Firth education plan there. So so private drum teacher program is what they called it, which was an endorsement program too. So yeah, man. But Frank, I'm wondering if you can recommend any great books for our listeners. I can only imagine what you read. Oh, I
don't know.
I wasn't even talking about. Nice shirt, dude. I wasn't even
Rick
talking about
Plugosaurus.
I wasn't even talking about my method books.
We know.
Motivational and psychology books.
You weren't talking about your books, which, by the way, are now available on Hudson.
Congrats
well,
on
while
that.
we're at it, yeah. But
well,
on Hudson Digital now. Frank, thank you for teaching out on my books. I really appreciate that. But I was trying to pick your brain on some nuggets of the psychology behind drumming
Mm,
and motivation for musicians and any other career, if you could recommend anything
mm.
like that.
Okay, well, this is a good idea because I think it's real important for musicians to read stuff that's not music,
Mm.
not related to directly a musical idea. Um, and I think the converse is true. Like I think academics should just be, we should be doing things outside of our area too. It goes both ways. But one book that I have uh, given to students, and I hear back from people on this, is a book called The Brain That Changes Itself.
Mm.
And it's written by a clinician, Norman Doidge, if you want to look it up. I've used it in my psych classes, but I've actually recommended it in lessons to several people. The book is essentially about your brain. Uh, your brain it's designed to learn. It's designed to change, but the capacity to do that is oftentimes choices and decisions you have to make. Your brain could adapt to it, but we often will put the roadblock up and say, well, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. This is too hard. It's like the brain actually can change in remarkable ways. And
Mm.
music is one of them that's talked about in the book. But
Mm.
it's just a mindset of that the brain is what we call neuroplastic. It
Mm.
kind of modifies and adjusts itself. I mean, that's the only organ that I know of in our body that through an experience will sort of remodel itself.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
mean, that's fascinating. I always tell my students, I love the pancreas. You need a pancreas, but the pancreas isn't remodeling itself based on learning and experiences. Like your brain is doing that, which is fascinating to me. So the brain that changes itself will give a person a perspective um, that doing things that are difficult are good, doing things that are hard and are challenging are ways to rewire the brain. The more difficult, the more challenging, the better generally, because um, the brain gets complacent. Basically, if you kind of do something in the same way all the time, that
Mhm.
pathway gets laid down in terms of the brain pathway, and it's like a street that you use all the time. So of
Right.
course it's real well practiced, but you have to go off of that.
It's
You
the
you
I
know
call that I refer to that as the path of least resistance. And
yeah.
sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes that's just a habit and the thing that's easy and
Yep.
it takes effort, a conscious effort to break out of that. Yeah. Good, good.
That,
So,
that's
Frank,
talked about a lot in that book, is that our neural pathways, the things that we're good at and the habits that we have, are often a little bit self-deluding because we think that that's the only way it can be done because it's the easiest way.
Right.
And if you force your brain to learn something new, of course it's difficult. Of course you're gonna push back on it because you're trying to physically change those connections, and you have to take on the mindset that that's the best path, even if you don't see success right away.
Love it.
So is
so
it that when you're practicing and you're trying to figure something out and there's that, oh god, that's so hard, or like,
Yes.
oh, isn't that your brain learning? Isn't that the equivalent of when you're lifting weights and you're
Uh,
straining?
Do,
may I?
yeah.
I have a student who's a personal trainer, and we've been trading personal training sessions for drum lessons for 10 years. And one of her things she says is chase the pain. And
Mm,
she,
Ah,
the idea that this is why you're here when you're working out, like your body physically wants to avoid the pain. You're doing this thing, it's very hard. You tried everything, your body does everything it can do to escape the pain. And she says when you do that, your form breaks down and you lose the point of the exercise. The whole point of doing it is for the pain is the point, and
mm,
not not to put you like
mm.
whatever debilitated, but just like to
yeah,
feel the muscle burn, right? You have to tear the muscles for them to actually rebuild stronger.
yes,
So you
Yeah.
have to lean it. And I use that all the time with my students. It's like, I know this is difficult, but this is where you're actually really learning something.
Yep.
Frank,
Yep.
when you think about thought processes in students, so one of the things I read up on your PASIC on the website on PASIC is the students comparing themselves to social media
Mm.
drummers
Mm.
and that negative construct that they develop. And how do you advise students, or how do you help students deal with comparing themselves to other drummers. What's your
Good question.
advice there?
Well, that's good because I do that. And I'm pretty critical of it, to be honest. I'm pretty critical of some of the things they're watching. So I want to see what they're watching, because sometimes I need to see, which things are we talking about here? Because some of it's, okay, some of it's clearly manipulative. So it's like, let me just see what accounts, if they're willing to show me who they're trying to learn from. And a lot of times it's just these blazing fast things, they're 20 seconds long. And I'm very critical of it. And I say, look, how many times on that person's account do they talk about how many takes it took to get that? Just see if they do that. Some people do, actually, but a lot of people don't. It's the best take. It's the most glossed, highly edited version of that performance. You're watching a best of account, but in the student's mind, they're just like, oh, they must have just gone downstairs and
Yeah, right.
and amazed, right? That's
With
the
no
best.
practice. Yeah, right.
Yeah, just woke up, went downstairs, and I said, that's a big flaw. You are watching highly edited, highly modified versions of reality. and you need to understand that it's not that everything out there is bad, but when you look at accounts that just kind of really focus on that one skill or that one lick or something that's getting a lot of views, like, be very careful of how you interpret that, because those there's as far as I know, I mean, maybe it'll change someday, but there's nobody born to play a musical instrument, in my opinion. You're not born to play drums. You are made. You have to make it happen. You can have certain tendencies and abilities, and sort of like you can be, you could have a very musical family and everything, but experts are made and not born. That's a big thing from my standpoint, and that's kind of that's the psychology of deliberate practice, right?
Yes.
It's made, not born. And
Have you read the book The Talent Code?
yeah, that's a great one.
Yep.
Really good book by Daniel
That's it.
Coyle that talks a lot about that. That geniuses aren't born, or artists, whatever.
Yeah,
it's all about it.
So related to Chip's thing, I think that's what students are getting the impression of. They're just talented. They're just born with this ability. And I'm like, you could be that if that's the skill you want to develop, but just understand that that's practice, and that's deliberate practice. It's focused on very, very specific things. And I think that's good. If you focus on your weaknesses and you focus on skills that you don't have, and you're consistent about that, you will get better. I mean, there's no question. But in my basic presentation, I made a list of about 10 or 12 social media accounts that I think are actually good inputs for you. So if you are using social media, which almost every student is, you got to have good inputs. Understand that there's some that aren't very helpful to you, but there are some that are. And I list out several that I follow, and I selected those specifically for how they talk about what they do, and if they're more open about what you have to do to achieve this, and it's just not all flash. So I put that in the presentation, and I could get that, or if they go to Basic site, I think they can actually see that. But there's some great people out there.
Excellent.
Right on.
So don't freak out over watching a Chip Ritter video and burn your drums.
Yep, I'm quitting though today after.
I'm
still quitting.
I've quit hundreds of times.
Frank, I have often when I'm working with a student and we're trying to get a new part, let's just say they're trying to figure out some new funk beat. I find that, and I'd love your input on this. I find that a lot of times they say that when they're not getting it, they're saying, "Oh, I'm thinking too hard." And my opinion is always, no, I think you're just trying to sound something out that you don't understand. I feel like you're not thinking enough, that you need to break it down, slow it down, figure out what it is, really learn the notes. So, and then when you've gone through that process and you have it right and you've done it over and over and over, then you're in the zone.
Yeah.
And then okay, because you're looking at well, you're not thinking about it because you have thought about it hundreds of times, right? Like a football player who's throws the perfect pass, they were in the zone when they did it.
Yep.
But in practice, they threw 10,000 practices. So
Yep.
do you have any input on that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it doesn't. And I heard that comment many times myself from students.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think they are not thinking enough, and they're not. I think something we have to keep reinforcing is that, you know, things will come out of you if you're playing a style, if you're listening to it. You know, if you are listening to that style, I find that it's a little more authentic than just they're trying to, you know, play it out of the book. And there's a big difference there. You know, I definitely have seen that.
Absolutely.
There's a feel, there's a touch. And I say, you know, if a student is sort of struggling with maybe getting down, you know, they play the notes, but you can just tell it doesn't quite have the feel. I think that's where the teacher has to say, look, you know, at this point, you're technically correct, but you need to listen to Tower of Power. You know, you got to listen to Dave Garibaldi, and you need to sort of internalize the music for a little while still practicing, while still working on the exercises. But the listening is practice, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Listening is practice. I mean, you are doing it. That is being interpreted by your brain. That's going to make you play. That music will come out of you a lot easier. So I think, you know, if I could add to what you said, I think it's right what you said, but I would also say, like, they should try to figure out times to listen more. Students, they put on a song and they don't even listen to it, and they start playing right away, right?
Right.
I mean, and it's like, but you haven't listened to this music. They just start playing the beat or something, and I'm like, let's just sticks down. You know, I have a phrase, by the way.
Yeah.
Sticks down. Listen to this first. You just use your ears and just try to interpret the music. I think there is a lot of things going on with students that they must be able to kind of do it instantaneously, and that comes from not just social media, but it comes from video games, and it comes from just a whole cultural mentality.
Yes. Yeah. The immediate, I want to get it before you're on your way to trying it before you've even let me finish my sentence about how I'm trying to explain it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you have these students too.
Oh yeah, all the time. And you know, one of the things that yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
Are they the same students? Or are they?
Right. Teaching them how to listen. I think that's a really critical job of the drum teacher. And I don't just mean quiet and listen to music and put your sticks down. I mean, like, what do you notice about the way the drum set's being played?
Yep.
What do you notice about the balance of the parts of the kit? What do you notice most prominently? What could you just say about the sound of the hi-hat that you're hearing on this song, and how it's different from this song? And what impact does that have emotionally or feel-wise or groove-wise to the song?
Yep.
And then they start noticing things, right? And then and from the noticing comes the imitation or the conjuring or whatever, and then the ability to shape the feel of the tune based on the way you deliver the beat. I'm a big believer in this, you know, focusing on the how more than the what. They're always focused on the what. Just like drummers can learn parts note for note and play them perfectly technically right, and it sound nothing like the feeling of the recording, right?
That's right.
There you go, Rick.
Yep.
There it is.
Yeah.
You know,
what are we looking at, Rick?
We're looking at all of the songs. We're looking at my first book. I hate to do a shameless plug, but I'm gonna, because it's relative
Basic
to
rock
the conversation. Boom, tick, kick on 1 and 3, snare on 2 and 4, hi-hat 8s. Every one of those songs listed in my book uses that from start to finish. So yeah, you could learn boom, tick, and play it, but like what Frank says, let's listen to how it's used. So there's a list right there of 20 songs that use that beat. So you can
Differently,
practice
yeah.
by listening and listen to what Jeremy's saying, which Jeremy's a master at. Like, listen to those subtleties between the volumes of the drums. So it's not just on paper, here is a beat, it's how it's applied.
Well, it's also about listening to where the time is, which is what I was going to ask Frank. You know, when you have a student and they're struggling with playing in time, the concept of time, do you have any specific lessons or things that you kind of shoot over at them that you go to when you're teaching a student like that?
Well, this is interesting because I think sometimes you have to get them off of the drum set to kind of get, so it's like, okay, if they hear the song, where are they hearing the beat? Where are they hearing the rhythm? And I'll just shamelessly say I borrowed this. So Chad Saliga, I think his name, Breaking Benjamin drummer, recently had an idea that he's like, give them a broom, put the music on, put them in the garage or something, and just have that student sweep the beat with the broom.
Huh.
And if they sweep in a weird way, they probably don't feel the music. So of course, when they get behind the kid, it's going to be all off. Or have them bounce the basketball to the rhythm, right? Because I mean, actually, the motion for some of the stuff we do is very much like bouncing a ball. So get them into something that's not drum related, and see if you can identify if they're feeling the beat. And I've done that, and they think it's fun for one. And it's also like you're a little bit of a Mr. Miyagi when you do this.
Out of the box, and you get your garage
and your floor cleaned. Yeah.
Yeah, you get a 2-for-1. The house is spick and span.
Yeah.
And they've learned how to play.
Right. Next, polish the cars. Yeah.
But there is something to, I mean, it's such a physical instrument, right? It's such a physical thing that we do. And if they are having trouble with the beat, I think taking them, and it also takes the pressure off them. It's like, okay, you're not behind the drums now. Just do this thing. Let me see what's going on here. Where are they feeling it? Where are they getting it from? Because rhythm is everywhere. Rhythm's in all kinds of things in our life. And if and if they're feeling off the beat, sometimes making it less intimidating can be a good way to do it.
Nice. Hey, before we wrap up, we're getting close here. I want to highlight some of the comments we've had from some of our community. Thanks you guys for listening as always and for tuning in.
Yeah, shout out to James Harrison and Fred Fisher. Thanks for watching.
Appreciate you guys. Fred says, I tell my students, this is doubling back on some things we covered earlier. I tell my students to be here, meaning to show up for their lessons, even if they didn't practice. There's always something to work on.
Yes.
100%.
Very good.
100%. Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a student come in, when they haven't practiced at all and you didn't have a productive lesson? No. There's sometimes those are even the most productive lessons, right?
Yep.
Because there's no expectation of reviewing the material. Okay, let's get deeper into this thing, or talk about something that has never come up before, or let's ask me those questions about my sticks that you always wanted to ask, kind of stuff,
Yeah, exactly.
James says, to be honest, teachers can see if you're practiced or if you're prepared for a lesson. There have been times when I've taught tuning, maintenance, miking tips, etc., rather than stopping or canceling an unprepared student. Right.
Thank you, James.
Yeah.
And I think you don't want the lesson to be a punishment, right? You don't want them to, that sets up a bad expectation. Oh, if I don't come here with the best things, that he punishes me. That's an association that they start forming.
Frank, I've got to ask you, based on that, what do you tell the student who says, I want you to beat me up? I want you to punish me. I've had students like that. Like, I want you to be really hard on me. I want you to be really, really tough on me.
Yeah.
What do you tell
Go
them?
find another teacher.
I give them your book. I give them your book, Rick, and I just say next time everything.
Yeah.
I like that.
All the BPMs of straight back and forth.
Nice.
You want to be tough? Here we go. Bam.
Or 20 push-ups if you can't do it.
Right.
But some students, there's a whole psychology of there's some clinical people who get over their depression and over their anxiety by the counselor or the therapist, like confronting them and being very direct and being kind of like insulting. There's some people that respond to that. That's actually something they physically need in their life. And there's other people that react totally opposite to that.
Right.
So it has to be the fit, I think. Really.
Yes.
fit
Yeah.
for the student.
Totally.
If that student's really demanding that, at first when you said beat them up, I thought, gee whiz, what kind of lessons are going on?
I didn't mean
but
physically.
yeah, I know.
Well, that's why Rick charges so much.
But it's true. You have to sort of be, as the teacher, I think you have to try to fit a little bit of more toughness and a little more of a push for that one student. But then you can't just go and take the other student and say, well, I do this, so I'll do this to you too.
Yes.
That won't work.
I had a student,
Okay.
I wrote the story in my book. I had a student who was very undisciplined, ADHD, and always unprepared, and never had his materials and hardly practiced. And I was patient. I tried all these things, practice schedule, all this stuff. And finally he stopped taking lessons, and I recommended another teacher to him. And he went to the second lesson, hadn't practiced. And the teacher said, look, if you're not practicing, I'm not going to teach you. He was super stern and set the boundary. And he said that was the best thing that ever happened to him. And he started practicing after that. And it was great. And I was like, wow, that's fantastic. And it made me think, oh man, I should have done that with him right from the get-go. That was what he needed, but that wasn't what I was offering. Right. But that definitely doesn't work for everyone. Because there's some people that's going to have the polar opposite effect. And, the last thing we want to do is demotivate people or scare them away from this thing.
I had a drum teacher do that to me, and it ran me off into the bushes, man. I went the other way. I was like, no, sir.
Yep.
So the perfect segue to Fred's comment. He says a good teacher should be able to pass on the excitement and enthusiasm for the instrument to help make them the best they can be. Enthusiasm and excitement. Very, very important. Yeah.
Fred
right
is the
on.
man.
Yeah, because again, guys, I think what we're doing, we're changing people's lives. I mean, whether you can put it in whatever perspective you want, but when you're teaching drums to a student and they're learning, you're changing their life. I mean, I know it's not rocket science, we're not brain surgeons, but we are changing people's lives. We're giving them music. It's tough times, like you guys have talked about at the beginning. Things are going to be rough, and so we're giving people inspiration and music. And man, you can't put a price on that. What that does to somebody is immeasurable, and it's a very, very good thing.
Oh, Frank, that's
very cool.
What a beautiful thing. Very well said, and a beautiful way to wrap up this episode. Thank you so much for coming on our show. We're delighted.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, man.
We'll have you back anytime, man.
It was so cool. Thank you.
What an incredible guest you were, Frank, and thank you for all the support. And are we gonna see you at PASIC again this year? Will you be coming in November?
I've already booked the hotel, man.
Awesome. We will be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's hang out. Let's have dinner.
Yeah.
My wife is gonna go with me, so we're gonna make a trip out of it, and I can't wait. I'm so, because it's the 50th, right? This is the big 50.
Oh,
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, thanks again, Frank, and good luck to you with all your teaching and your gigging and your teaching and your teaching.
Yeah.
As well to you guys as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll be back next week. We're going to have a special guest from Audix Microphones, one of our new sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for Deck Day. Chip's going to put the link in the chat. That's our live event coming up in April down at the Aquarian Warehouse in Orange, California. It's going to be 4 drum clinics, drumhead presentation from Mike Bruker about how to pick heads, a tour of the Aquarian facility. We're going to have tons and tons of free equipment giveaways from our sponsors, Vic Firth, Prologix, Protection Racket, Mel Bay, Humes & Berg, Sabian, Peisty, Snare Weight, and a whole bunch of other ones I can't even think of right now. So there's all sorts of free gear we're going to give away, and it's only $125. So get your reservation in now before it sells out. And thanks you guys for tuning in.
Okay.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
I'll give you the Cuban kit to finish.
Give it to us.
Hi, Frank. Thank you.